Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Cooperative this morning. Beautiful, beautiful Thursday morning. Listen, this is Women's Month. National March is Women's Month, celebrating women and the history of women. National Women's History Project's theme for this year is Nevertheless, She Persisted, honoring women who fight for all forms of discrimination against women. Last month was Black History Month. Women's History Month is this month. And this day, we have Christina Jennings, the Executive Director of Shared Capital Cooperative. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning, Vernon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on and all that you do. What is Shared Capital?
So Shared Capital Cooperative is a cooperatively owned loan fund that brings financing, brings access to capital to cooperative businesses and housing groups around the country, so throughout the U.S. And we, as I said, we're cooperatively owned, so we're actually owned by cooperatives who borrow from us, who invest in us, and make sure there's capital available for new co-ops and expansions and supporting the cooperative sector.
New co-ops, expansion. And how many members do you have? How many cooperative members?
Yeah, we have 225, a little more than 225 cooperative members in 35 states and the District of Columbia. 35
states and D.C. All right. So 225 different co-ops came together, or so many of them came together to form Shared Capital Cooperative, and now they own it. So it's a cooperative owned by businesses.
Yeah, so we like a credit union, but the members are we're not a regulated credit union, but structured similarly as a cooperative. But our members, our owners, are primarily businesses. They're the cooperatives themselves who want to make sure that there's capital available for the cooperative sector. So we actually founded 40 years ago by a group of co-op managers and organizers who wanted to have more ready access to the financing they needed to support their businesses.
40-year-old, all right. And do you have any idea how many co-ops came together?
I think it was a small number initially. 7 to 10, I think, were the original group. Mm-hmm. Pooled a very small amount of capital, less than $1,000. And shared that money, thus the name, shared their money between each other to buy new small equipment and things like that. And over time, we grew, and we're now $11 million fund that is working throughout the U.S.
From 1,000 to 11 million.
Been a long path.
That's 11,000 times its original start. Okay. That's a wonderful story. And just real quickly, do you all have many defaults where people don't pay back their loans?
Yeah, we have a really low default rate. I have to say that relative to a lot of other loan funds that lend to small businesses, I think the cooperatives are very diligent about paying because they recognize this money is really from the sector and for the sector, and they want to make sure it gets repaid. So we have a very low default rate, less than 2.5% over our entire history.
I went there real quickly because that seems to be the norm for people loaning money to the cooperative sector. They mainly pay back their money.
They do, yes, you're right.
And Dr. Jessica Gordon-Emhart, who wrote the book Collective Carrot, said that for cooperative business, if you look at them after 5 years, about 90% of them are still in business, where a capitalistic business, only about 10 to 15% are still in business. So it looks like if you're in a cooperative business, you'll stay in business longer, it'll be more successful, and therefore you'll pay back your bills. Neat.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's a mission commitment, and and the business model. I think we've seen it as more stable. So during the recession, a lot of businesses were really hard hit. The co-ops were able to really weather that well, and we when we would tell our investors and tell our peers that we had a zero delinquency rate during most of the recession, they maybe didn't believe us initially, but in fact it was true that they were, our co-ops were paying us. If they had money, they were going to make their payments.
So you're talking about 07, 08, 09?
Yeah,
area?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the rest of the banking world is, I don't know, folks are jumping out of windows almost because people they don't have the money to pay back. Particularly, it's interesting. It starts with the mortgages. Couldn't pay back mortgages, and then it just sort of trickled all the way through the system, but not for Shared Capital Cooperative. Okay, that's great news. Listen, what I would like to do is if you could tell us, the audience, how they could get a hold of you if somebody wants to start a cooperative, or they need a cooperative that needs a loan, or they may want to join. How do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find information on the internet at sharedcapital.coop, or you can give us a call at 612-767-2100. Also, info@sharedcapital.coop if you want to email. But our website has information and ways to contact us if you want to go there.
Okay, so that's shared, SHARED, capital CAPITAL.
Correct.
.coop.
Correct.
Okay, not the Washington, D.C. capital OL. Okay.
Correct, yes. I'll make you do the spelling. Thanks, yes. Thank you.
All right, I've made that mistake so many times, so yes.
We get asked it a lot. I should spell it out for you, but I wasn't going to risk that. Have you do it.
How long have you been in this business?
So I've been with Shared Capital for 10 years, and that was really when I came to the cooperative sector was 10 years ago. Before that, I've been in community development finance, which I consider Shared Capital part of, for about 20 years, but was maybe a latecomer to the cooperative.
So how did you get to the cooperative movement then?
Well, I certainly had been around co-ops. I'd seen co-ops. I knew of some great stories of cooperatives from work. I spent some time in Central America when I was in college and just out of college. I had the chance to see coffee cooperatives and other types of agricultural cooperatives that made a big difference in people's lives there. Saw some cooperatives in the U.S., but I wasn't really involved in it. And I'd gotten excited about the possibility of microfinance and small loans to people who typically didn't have access to them, and worked in that field for a number of years, both in the U.S., running a loan fund here, and also working with microfinance organizations in Central America and raising capital to support to help them do their work. And through that work, I think there was a lot of really positive things, but I think one thing that was frustrating was that really we're putting capital in the hands of individual entrepreneurs, women, folks who are living in poverty, but we're not changing the fundamental systems in which they operate. And so it felt like there's only so far they could go, that they were trying to navigate markets and distribution and all of those things, but didn't necessarily have all the tools. And a cooperative, as an organized body, can really help push past some of those barriers I saw. And so I was really excited when I had the opportunity to come to Shared Capital and engage in that way.
Well, you said you got late in your career. Well, I didn't find out about co-ops until about 20 years ago, but I was already 50. So I was amazed that I did not get it in college. What college did you go to that you even got knowledge about co-ops?
Well, I went to a pretty funky college, Hampshire College. It's in Western Massachusetts. It's a great school. You design your own major. You work really closely with faculty. I actually didn't learn much about co-ops there either. I guess I heard about them a little bit, but didn't really study them there.
Mm-hmm.
I was studying alternative economic models, and you'd think that would be part of it, but it wasn't necessarily a formal focus at that time. That was late 80s, early 90s, and folks weren't talking about them that much.
Well, I got nothing in 3 degrees. I got no knowledge about co-ops. And I find that people don't know about co-ops, which is the reason that National Cooperative Bank is sponsoring this program, so that we can get the word out about co-ops. So you've told people how to reach you. Go to sharedcapital.coop or send an email at info@sharedcapital.coop or call 612-767-2100. What would they do if they wanted to get a loan? So you only loan to co-ops? Only
co-ops, yeah. Co-ops of any kind, but only to co-ops.
So what would a co-op need to do if they wanted? Let's say if it's somebody wanted to start a co-op. So you got somebody wants to start up a co-op. What would they do to apply for and perhaps get a loan from Shared Capital?
Yeah, so they would give us a call, and we would put them on the phone with one of our loan officers. We have a couple of loan officers who would talk through the process, find out more about the business, what are they trying to do, what resources they have. And frankly, at an early stage, if they're still just thinking about starting, we'd help them connect with resources that might be out there, folks who can support them in designing the business and thinking about the governance structure for their cooperative. And but it's never too early to have a conversation. We're happy to talk to folks who are at any stage of thinking about cooperative startup or expansion. And sometimes we also see cooperatives that need financing to help them stabilize because they've had some hard times. So we see all of those. Mm-hmm. And it's never too early to have a conversation. I think our role is to be a friendly lender, a cooperative lender that is going to understand their business model and can offer some guidance on capital structures for them that might work, what role we can play, who else they might go to. So, any time that folks are thinking about possibly borrowing or needing to borrow for a co-op project, we're happy to talk to them.
So you do more than loan money.
Yeah.
So loaning money is a part of it. You got contacts that would help them with their technical support, governance support, whatever they might need. So anybody out there, if you are thinking about a business, then you want a financial partner that's really interested in your success, and this sounds like what Shared Capital is.
As a cooperative ourselves, I mean, we have firsthand experience with many of those challenges and the strength of the cooperative model, but we also...
Christina, we've got to take our first break. I'm sorry. I was so interested. I forgot all about it. Thank you. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOL and 95.9 FM.
Information is power. That's why WOL makes a great partner, because the National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this program to get the information you might need to start a co-op or find a co-op, join a co-op, expand your co-op, as we're talking to Christina Jennings this morning from Shared Capital. Christina, you were talking about that not only do you loan money, but you help people with the technology or the governance, and you really want to get to know the people and the business. Why? Why would you go through all of that? Banks don't do that normally. They get a little sense of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we know that for any business to be successful, that there's a small businesses need support of all different types, and we don't try to provide all of that support. We plug into a broad network of cooperative developers, cooperative consultants, folks who understand business and understand cooperatives, and we make those connections. And we really focus our assistance on questions about how to finance cooperative projects and build capital. But we know all of that is critical, that access to technical assistance, advice, training is what's going to ultimately make the business successful for the cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
And the financing alone doesn't, in most cases, is not enough.
Well, the financing alone is not enough, and I guess that's why co-ops are so successful, and they end up paying back. They have the knowledge to be successful, and they have loyalty if you're going through helping to make sure they're successful.
Absolutely, yeah. We've our member base. I mean, our structure really is unique among lenders to among loan funds for cooperatives. NCB as a cooperative itself has that membership base, and then we too have this structure that ensures that we are attuned to what co-ops need for financing, and that it's capital that's actually controlled by the cooperatives and by the cooperative sector. We have other investors who come in as allies and want to support co-ops, but ultimately the ownership of the fund is the co-ops, and they are the ones who help drive our mission and our vision and keep us honest in moving that work forward.
Okay, so if they want to get information, they go to your webpage or send your email or call. Got that. What is the process for getting a loan?
Yeah, we have an application process where we try to gather as much information. There are usually a number of phone conversations since we're working with folks all over the country. Sometimes we can sit down face-to-face. Sometimes it's by phone, really making sure we understand the business that they are in, understand the cooperative, that it's a cooperative. Since we only lend to cooperatives, we need to understand that, in fact, it is a cooperative. And then, so they fill out an application, and we take that through we have a loan committee that makes all of our lending decisions. It's a committee of our board. Our board is elected by our members. So all of our members can nominate folks to the board, and they vote for the board. And that board chooses the loan committee based on folks out of the cooperative sector who understand different kinds of co-ops, understand cooperative housing, worker-owned co-ops, food co-ops, small farmer co-ops, et cetera. And so we have folks who are on our loan committee who spend quite a bit of time reviewing the proposals and assessing whether they think it's a good credit risk. Our goal is to get the money into co-ops' hands, but at the end of the day, we also have the goal of making sure we can return our money to our members who are giving us their hard-earned savings to support other cooperatives. And so we also want to make sure that the business is going to be successful and be able to repay. So do that assessment, and I'll tell you, very rarely do we say no. Sometimes we do say, we need you to do these things before we're ready to make you a loan, but it's usually a process of trying to figure out how to make the loan.
So it's a process to figure out how to get to yes.
How to get to yes, exactly. And we partner a lot with other lenders.
You're a strange banker.
Yeah, I didn't come out of banking, so maybe that's why, yeah.
We want to make a loan. How do we get to yes? Okay, here's some things you might need to do in order for us to get to yes. All right. And that's probably in the thing that they would have to do that you would recommend would be things that would cause the business to be successful.
I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, we want, if the business isn't successful, then a loan hasn't done them any good. Saddling them with debt is not a good thing if they're not going to be successful, or it's a loan they can't repay. I think one of the things we worry about is making good loans. I think often when borrowers, and this is true for individuals in the mortgage crisis, if the loan goes bad, we tend to blame the person who borrowed the money. In fact, as we know from the housing crisis, the mortgage crisis, often it's the lender who made the mistake, didn't structure it in a way that worked for the folks who are borrowing. And so I think we really try to take that to heart and make sure we're doing the right thing.
That's a nice view. That's a different view. And I do have at the 07-08 with the different types of loans that were made were designed to fail. They couldn't make it.
That's right.
Okay.
They weren't concerned about the financial future of the people who were borrowing. You're right. They were looking for making money and getting bonuses and so on. And that's definitely not the way we want to work.
So you make loans to all types of co-ops. So real quickly, the 4 types of co-ops that I normally talk about on this program are a worker co-op. The co-op is owned and controlled by the employees. A consumer cooperative, it's owned and controlled by the people that buy or uses the service or products. And a lot of times those are housing and food co-ops. Although food co-ops could be a worker co-op, could be owned by the workers or the shoppers, or both. So you get the different consumer co-ops, and then you have the purchasing co-ops and the marketing co-ops, which farmers and artists are using both of those a lot. But there's a purchasing co-op here in the D.C. area called Community Purchasing Alliance, and they have charter schools and nonprofits to help them buy things like trash and solar and copy machines, and they've been able to save them a lot of money. So you have those 4 different types of co-ops. So you loan to all of those?
That's correct. We do, yeah. So we make about almost half of our loans are to housing cooperatives of all different kinds, usually small housing cooperatives. We'll often refer big projects to the National Co-op Bank. We're not big enough to do all housing projects. And then we also about half are a variety of different kinds of other types of cooperatives. And I think one of the critical things for us is we are set up to support access to capital for individuals and who are in co-ops who don't have access. And so the focus is on co-ops that are being organized by low-income communities, by women, by communities of color, who typically can't go into a bank and get a loan. And so that's been a focus of ours for a number of decades. And so, for example, last year, 95% of our loans went to low-income women and people of color-owned cooperatives.
95% to women
Correct.
and people of color.
And low-income owned, yeah. So really wanting to focus on where folks don't have capital access, where we have $11 million doesn't go that far, and so we know we need to be strategic about having an impact, and that's how we do that.
Okay, I'm a property manager. That's where I learned about co-ops, managing housing co-ops. And most of the properties have significant replacement reserves. What kind of return could they get if they put their money into shared capital?
Yeah, the average return, we just like co-op business model doesn't, we don't offer a high return, but we offer a steady return. So our members can invest and get a return of an average of about 3%, and depending on how long they can commit their funds. And that's not a bad return in today's market, but it's some folks are looking for the higher return. But what I think we remind them that they're having a huge social impact on communities, and then they're also, frankly, getting a stable investment. We've never failed to repay an investor in full, and we have a nice track record for our members to know that they'll get their money back.
What I would like to be able to do is talk to the co-ops that I manage and see about putting some of their money in shared capital. 3% is more than 0.5 or 1% that CDs are paying, but also there's a social aspect of it.
Yeah, our members are just fabulous in that they're putting their money in both because they need a return because they need to support their business, but they also recognize that cooperation among cooperatives is a big driver for our members to invest with us, and so we'd be happy. Yeah, we'd be happy to talk with you and share information to help you communicate that with those co-ops.
Okay, we're going to take our second break here in a minute or half a minute. But what I wanted to ask you to do when we come back is if you could talk about some of the loans, not by the names of the people necessarily, but the types of different loans you've made to do these different 4 types. And I'm really interested in what loans you make to housing co-ops on the other side. So when we come back on, if you could give us some examples of loans and or if there's any detailed processes or any issues that you had in processing stuff and how you were able to get over it. But we'll be right back.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOL and 95.9 FM.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. The program is Everything Cooperative, and this morning we have Miss Christina Jennings from Shared Capital Cooperative as our guest this morning. And the National Cooperative Bank is a sponsor of this program, and NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. Sounds like, Christina, you all have a very similar mission.
We do, and we actually, National Cooperative Bank is a key partner. They're actually a member of ours, which we are very excited about, and they also are a financial partner in a lot of projects that we finance. So have a lot of overlap in our mission, absolutely.
Okay. I didn't know they were a partner and a member. That's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck Snyder, the president of NCB, has been on the program about 3 times, and he almost blushes when I tell him Miss McDonald from, which co-op was she from? She said that Chuck and his group are angels, the work that they do. She's from Cabot Creamery, I think. I hope I got it right. Okay.
Well, and I think our experience with them is that they've been incredibly collaborative with us. There could be places where we could be competing for loans, and instead their team and and with a commitment starting at the top with Chuck, have been really clear that we're all going to be better off. The cooperative sector is better off if we collaborate, and that's exactly the way they've approached their work with us and the way we approach our work with them. And so they're a great partner.
Collaborate or cooperate. Okay, they work in, and that's the 6th principle again, cooperations among cooperatives. They serve their members most effectively and strengthen the cooperative movement by working together through local, national, regional, and international structures. So they're doing it. You're doing it. Great. So can you give us some examples, maybe from each of the cooperative sectors, of the kinds of loans you've made?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll start with a housing co-op project that is one that I love to share because it's a townhouse, a group of townhouses that are owned as a cooperative in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they have been around for, I think they became a cooperative in the 1940s. It was originally railroad worker housing, and they have, as it became a cooperative, and has been a really important affordable housing option for its residents, with townhomes that were really affordable to low-income and moderate-income families. And a number of winters ago, their boiler went out. It was a cold winter, and they were faced with a major repair. And as is often the case for many co-ops, not quite enough reserves in place, because it's quite common that you haven't anticipated that scale of repair. So they went to their local bank, and I think a good local bank, a community bank. But for the local bank, the $150,000 price tag just wasn't enough to make it worth their while to navigate through trying to make a loan to a co-op. They didn't really understand co-ops. Didn't understand the structure, how the equity worked, how the membership worked. And for $150,000, that's just, for many banks, that's a small loan.
My understanding, if I could stop you a minute, my understanding is for the banks, they also look for somebody to sign. And that's right. So they look for an individual to sign. And banks, in my training with banks, they look for 3 things. They look for getting their money back, They look for getting their money back, and they look for getting their money back.
Yes, that's right.
And the way they know they get their money back is that people have collateral. So they make loans to people that already have assets, so that if they fail on that $150,000, they can go grab their boat or their house or their stocks or bonds or whatever to pay back their money, to get their money back. And so most low-income people don't have the assets. So that makes another reason that banks, they don't have the person they can go after to sign it. It's a group of people, and the people normally don't have the assets. So that's why banks mostly can't deal with co-ops, that I understand.
That's exactly right, Vernon. That's exactly. Now, the interesting thing in this case is that here they have these townhomes. They're in good repair. They have no mortgage on them, so they are owned free and clear by the co-op, and they still can't get a loan despite the collateral.
How many
complicated.
How many townhomes? Do you remember that?
I think it's about 14 townhomes.
And
so the property with some value, and yet still well more than what they're looking at, a $150,000 loan, and the value of the property is way above that. So they contacted us, and we did two things. We got them that loan so they could get a new boiler in place, and we worked with them to get more reserves in place so that they would be better able to get a process where they're setting aside more each month to be able to make sure that if for the next repairs, they always come, that they'll have the funds to do that. But it's one that you'd think a bank would be able to make, and yet it really just, frankly, because of size, and we see that with small businesses and housing, that often conventional banks don't want to sort of mess around with a small loan, not worth their time.
The amount of interest they get won't pay for the processing and how much time it would take to do it.
That's exactly right.
It takes the same effort to do $1.5 million loan as a $150,000 loan. So, okay.
Yeah, you got it exactly right.
Got it.
So that's one. I think it's a good example of where we can step in and really play a role. Another would be, I could share about a small farmer cooperative. We work with a group called, I guess I'm not mentioning names, but on the west.
You can if you want to. I just didn't want to make it a part of the question, but if you want
Sure.
to, if it's okay with them, fine.
Yeah, it's in the Pacific Northwest. It's a group of sustainable flower growers, and they so all of these small farmers, they're growing sustainably grown flowers. And what they find is that it's tough maintaining an adequate presence in the market. How do they get these out to the people who want them? So they actually collectively came together and created a wholesale marketplace in Seattle. These are farmers from Alaska, from Washington State, from Oregon, and they all sell through this marketplace that they collectively own. And so this had been operating a couple of years, but they were finding that in order to grow, they needed some working capital, some money that they could use just to operate. And so they approached us, and we were able to make them a line of credit, a small line of credit, to help them, maintain their operations in the low season so they could really keep their presence. And so we've actually done that a few years in a row. Great borrower, and really help those small farmers be successful by having this outlet where they can reach the public.
And what is a small line of credit?
Oh, let's start $75,000. So not a big dollar amount, but it's enough to get them through their low season, and they have pretty low operating costs. But again, there was no. As you mentioned, collateral was an issue in this case, as you gave a great illustration of that being really the primary problem that cooperatives run into. And then the second issue was it was just, again, a small amount of money for most banks to look at. But a great project for us, supported the members, supported great small farmers who are trying to do good by the environment and their community and make a living. But they needed a little bit of cash to help make that possible. So that's where we were able to step in.
So just for anybody out there that doesn't know what a line of credit is, they can come in and get money when they need it, and they may need it when they're not selling their flowers to buy flower seeds or fertilizer or gas for their tractors, but whatever they might need in the off seasons when they don't have cash coming in, so that they can prepare the ground and grow the flowers, and they'll get the money back during the season and pay back the loan. That's how it works?
That's exactly right. Thanks, Ernie. Yep.
Okay. What else? You got a housing co-op, which is a consumer cooperative. You got a farmers cooperative, which is...
Yeah, I could share about a food cooperative if you'd like. We've worked with a number of startup food cooperatives. A lot of communities have been organizing around wanting access to healthy food, wanting a grocery store in their community that they can rely on, as big box stores have moved a lot of grocery out of local communities, as we've all seen. And so we've worked with a number of projects. One of them in North Carolina is a group that had no grocery store for almost 20 years. The community had been working to get a grocery store to come back into their community. They weren't able to do it. It's primarily African American community, and there was a large public housing project right next to the site that they wanted a grocery store. They wanted to bring access to healthy food to within reach of the local residents. And so the community, after working to get a chain in for years, finally decided enough was enough, and they were going to take matters into their own hands and bring a cooperative and create a cooperative themselves.
What city? What city is this in North Carolina?
This is in Greensboro, North Carolina.
And is that called the Renaissance?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So we worked with Renaissance Co-op early on. When they were working to get commitments from other funders, other lenders, we were able to step forward and provide a commitment of financing, which helped them get others to agree to step forward and put money in. And so worked with that community and to get that store open. So it opened about a year and a half ago. It's not an easy job running a grocery store, and so never a simple task. We see that with co-ops all over the country. You've got the grocery market is a tough one, but they were able to bring a store to their community, organized by local residents, and we were thrilled to be a part of helping make that happen, along with a lot of other funding sources that came forward. They've been on the program. Somebody from the Renaissance, and their story, as I recall it, is a phenomenal story that Winn-Dixie or some big box closed down, and it was sitting there vacant, and they didn't have food. And it seemed like the store was doing well, profitably wise, but the owners, for whatever reason, decided to leave that community. And so the people decided to do something for themselves. And one of the values of co-ops is self-help. And one of the ways of doing it is joining together. And they started, I think, at $10 membership. Maybe it was $100. But some smaller it was a $100 membership, and they could pay $10 a month or something to get in. It made it very reasonable. And I think they got 1,000 members, and they got the city to help them. And then, lo and behold, Shared Capital Cooperative came in and helped. Neat. It's a great story. Yeah, it's a great project, and there are communities around the country who are looking to their example and wanting to bring grocery stores into their local communities, and so they're an inspiring story.
So I've been talking to a group in Baltimore and a group in D.C. about this.
Great.
But I might tell them about you guys too, and we're going to take our third and final break. But before we do, we talked to food co-ops, housing co-ops, and a farmers cooperative. You have another one that you can tell us about. We have a minute before we go on a break.
Right. Yeah, I can tell you about a worker cooperative. There are a lot of different examples. One is a group of massage therapists and acupuncturists, and they wanted to start their own business because they were sort of sick of working for other people and not making much money. Decided to form a cooperative, and we were able to help finance that. That was a $17,000 loan, so quite small dollar amount, but made a huge difference for folks who didn't have a lot of assets themselves, but were hardworking, wanted to get the business up and running.
We'll come back and get the other worker cooperatives. We'll be right back.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOL and 95.9 FM.
Information is power. This is Vernon Oakes. The program is Everything Cooperative. And Ms. Christina Jennings is our guest, who is Executive Director of Shared Capital Cooperative. And before we left, you were talking about worker cooperatives. You had several of them to talk about. Please continue.
Yeah, so we've worked with a lot of worker cooperatives. We actually have a program called the Worker Ownership Loan Fund that really focuses on financing for worker cooperatives with the goal of creating jobs, creating living wage jobs in low-income communities, and we partner with folks who are organizing cooperatives around the country to make that work. Another example, we're seeing I think a lot of interest in converting existing businesses to worker ownership, and so we've had the opportunity to finance a number of projects that support the workers as they buy an existing business from the current owners. So one example would be a construction company, and the owners wanted to continue to work in the business, but they had really loyal employees who they recognized as key to the success of the business, and they wanted to share the business with them and be able to eventually move out and step out of the business in the future. So they saw worker ownership as a way both to retain loyal workers and also to allow them, as a way to transition out of the business over time successfully and ensure the long-term success of that business they had spent years building. And so we were able to work with the owners and with the workers to come up with a way for the workers to buy that. The current owners provided some financing. We were able to provide some financing, and that was about a $400,000 project, and we shared that project with another loan fund that we collaborate with quite frequently, and help them make that transition. So they are currently in the process of transitioning ownership, and the workers taking on ownership of that business.
Was the total price of the construction company $400,000, or that was the part
Correct.
that you all financed?
Well, that was the part we financed, and then there was some additional financing from the owners. Yeah.
Neat. Well, I went to
keep the jobs in the local community for the long haul that way, which I think is so critical.
I've been to a couple of meetings in Cincinnati Union Cooperative Movement, and the big one there is the conversion of manufacturing companies. And I was just amazed at the number of different manufacturing companies that are owned by baby boomers that are looking for people to buy them. And some of them just close shop because they don't have anybody to buy them, and that people lose their jobs. And if we get people to know there's another option, employees can buy this company. And they can go to Shared Capital and other places to get help. Both, you can tell them about the technical support they might need of how to do the governance, etc. It's all great stories. How do we get the message out to people so that these businesses don't close, because that means the owners have lost money if they just close the business. And
the community's lost jobs.
Yeah.
That's true.
So we got a construction company. We have massages, and masseuses, and chiropractors. $17,000 that helped them, and $400,000 a construction company. Got another one? I like these.
Yeah. One that's kind of a fun example of cooperation among co-ops is another startup food co-op. Here was a cooperative that was getting started in New York State, and they were they got a lot of support from other cooperatives in advice and they came to us for financing. Also got financing from a local bank, provided financing for equipment. We provided financing for their working capital and leasehold improvements, all these things that they needed that no one really wants to finance in a conventional bank. We were able to do some of that. But we could only do so much. We as I mentioned, we're still really a small fund at the end of the day, and we want to make sure our funds are available for a lot of projects. So we have a cap on how much we can lend, and they needed more than we could provide. And that was a great example of some of their allies, other co-ops, other food co-ops around the country came together, and 20 of them put together about $200,000 that they invested through Shared Capital, and we made the co-op a loan for $200,000, and each of those co-ops brought in about $5,000 to $20,000 each, and we pooled that together and made that loan to the co-op. That would have been a nightmare for the co-op to manage all those loans, but we're set up to do that, so we could get them the money they needed, still hold to our policies, and the most that we could lend was less than they needed. And so it really was a great example of the co-op stepping up to support each other.
So you had 20 food co-ops give about $5,000 to $10,000 each, and they get up $200,000.
Correct.
And then they give that money to you guys to manage.
That's right. So we manage that loan. We make the payments to all those food co-ops, and the co-op gets the money it needs, and it gets the support from the other co-ops. And that's happened at a number. We've had that type of model we've used before. Sometimes it's because they need the money from the other co-ops. Sometimes it's because the other co-ops want to invest and are looking for a way to invest directly, and that's a way to do it. So they essentially guarantee that loan, which allows us to as I said, sort of stick to our policies, which is that there's a cap on how much we can lend to a single borrower, but get them the funds they needed.
All right.
And the community gets a food co-op.
Yes. And if it's a co-op, well, let me ask you this question: do you like your work? I
do. I've worked in a lot of different loan funds over the years. I've worked in other areas, and I'm really passionate about what Shared Capital does. One of the things that I like the most is that we are a cooperative. I'd never run a cooperative before I came to Shared Capital, but and I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly clear why it mattered that we were a cooperative when I came on. I fortunately had enough sense not to say that in my interview.
Okay.
I knew I loved that we were working with co-ops, but I wasn't sure why I didn't think it mattered that we were. And I very quickly learned that was not the case. I think, within 6 months, I was completely sold that being a cooperative was the right structure. And the reason is that we are accountable to our members, and our members are cooperatives who are looking out for the long-term success of co-ops. We're not accountable to foundations. I mean, if we get money from foundations, then we obviously have an obligation to them, but that's not our membership. And so we're thinking about our members first and foremost, and our members have really stuck with us for over the years, sometimes through tough times and sometimes through good times. I don't think we'd necessarily be around today if we were answering to foundations rather than co-ops. Because foundations' priorities change over time. Our members are really clear on what they want this fund to do, and so that means we can provide capital to cooperatives with a really clear focus, we're not shifting around based on what funding is available and what foundations want us to do today. But the other thing is we have a business approach to our work that not all nonprofits have. So, we're not developing programs because that's what's fundable today. We're looking at how we can run a sustainable, profitable business for our membership. And I love that. That makes it all worthwhile.
Well, you answered the question before I asked, what lessons have you learned? in 6 months you learned a lot. Okay, why a co-op? Okay. Any other lessons that you could pass on to the audience of what you've learned, either particularly about co-ops? What makes them the whether it's a worker co-op that you're working with or a consumer co-op, whatever, or your own cooperative? What are the kinds of things you've learned about co-ops?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think I've learned a lot from our cooperative, but it's also just always inspiring the groups. I mean, I think I'm incredibly lucky to be in an organization that is getting to interact with all different types of cooperatives and communities across the country. So I get to see really, really committed individuals dedicating their time to building a better community, building financial stability, and helping build wealth for themselves as members of low-income communities. Just the self-help components of it, the commitment to other cooperatives is really inspiring. So I get to have a vantage point of not just my own cooperative that I get to be a part of, but I also get to see that. I'd say the one other thing is that, I think we as an organization, and this doesn't have to be unique to cooperatives, but I think it is often true for cooperatives. I think we really hold values about how we operate as a business, and I think that is a core cooperative value. When I've worked for some nonprofit organizations that didn't pay living wages to their employees or weren't committed to, they were asking their employees to do a lot and help change the world and make the community a better place, but they weren't necessarily recognizing that how they behaved should be part of that. When I was just getting started after college, I had a job working for a nonprofit that was doing fabulous work, fighting corporate greed, but we worked 50 hours a week. I had no maternity leave when my daughter was born. And I had
little money.
I had poverty wages.
Yeah.
And so, really important work, but we as an organization try to make sure we're also modeling and living the values.
That's the last word, modeling and living the values. Listen, thank you so much, very much, Christina, and everybody out there. Please have a wonderful cooperative week.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOS and 95.9 FM.